There are three things you can do to help us out.
1, you can make sure you subscribe to this channel.
2 is you can leave a comment here or on Apple Podcasts.
And 3, if you really want to help, you can follow this link to see how you could be a supporter on Patreon.
Word in Your Attic, a Zoom with a view.
Welcome to another Word in Your Attic, where excitingly we are joined by the author, a columnist, editor of The Idler, and man that we last saw in a big tent at Port Eliot Festival in Cornwall, playing punk classics on a ukulele. Fantastic to see him, the great Tom Hodgkinson. Tom, it's lovely to see you.
Thank you so much for coming.
Where are you and how are you?
I am in my office, which is a small office under the Westway in near Paddington. So it makes you feel a bit sort of Clash-like, because The Idol is a punk magazine. And I'm fine. Like everyone else, I just become completely obsessed by Get Back, which you two were probably actually there at the rooftop concert, weren't you?
Sadly not. Yes.
I wish. I was there.
But you are quite old, is the point I'm trying to make, isn't it?
What's that?
I am.
You are quite old.
Quite old.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, well, I am particularly.
Did you see the Beatles
as
play?
a child?
Did you see them play live in the 60s?
No.
Oh.
No.
How old were you when they were doing the concert, though?
I was working out. I was working out the other day. I was the same. I was 18 when they did the concert.
Yeah.
And I was slightly younger than I was watching part 3 last night, and I realised I was slightly younger than Constable Dag, who was interviewed. I think it was in the Sunday Times or something. This weekend is like early 70s or whatever. And I thought, my God, the policemen really were young then.
Really were. You looked incredibly young. Well, what were you wearing in those days, Dave? Did you have a big furry coat and green trousers?
I probably no. You wouldn't. You see, that's the interesting thing about I was. Particular attention last night watching it to the extraordinary wardrobe of Glyn Johns.
Yeah.
When he turns up,
Glyn Johns was turning up every day.
Yeah.
Absolutely eye-catching, and that was the kind of. We used to fantasize about wearing clothes like that because you couldn't get them, and even if you'd been able to get them, you wouldn't have been able to afford them.
Yeah,
those clothes were actually adopted by a tiny handful of people.
Yeah.
In the London of those days, most of whom were recording engineers who were the Beatles. Although interestingly, it's very sharp fall off in the sartorial range there in that film. You've got the Beatles. You've got Glyn Johns. And then you look at even Alan Parsons, who's the kind of trendy young tape-op from Abbey Road. Well, he's dressed like a solicitor's
It's a button-down shirt and a straight tie, isn't it?
Absolutely. That's exactly right. I was
they're
thinking
like
the
office
same thing.
workers.
Yeah, they're all office workers. And the Beatles way ahead fashion-wise.
Absolutely. And oddly enough, and I do think it's a huge part of the appeal of this film now, is that you take them out of 1969 and you set them down now, and they look like the most fabulous rock band you've ever seen in your life.
They're completely
and if you designed a rock band from scratch tomorrow, it would look like that.
Yeah,
it wouldn't look like Coldplay. It would look like the Beatles.
And what was so amazing about them was that it was also what I loved in terms of idling, I suppose. Just to bring it back to me, was the creativity. How they do it. It's this sort of mix of a sort of a Paul McCartney-esque kind of work ethic. When he said, we need a schedule of work.
Oh, yes.
But also, George is saying, the best things we've done when, it was all, random and unplanned and that sort of thing. So, and they're just thrown on, like John Lennon's just thrown on Yoko's coat, I think. And, Ringo's just thrown on Maureen's coat. It's almost what's sort of lying around. It's weirdly going with the flow. Like they haven't really sort of planned it. It's not like they've kind of got stylists planning their look.
No, those people did not exist. Literally didn't exist in those days.
Now they have a team of people working on hair and makeup and
I mean, McCartney particularly. McCartney looks fantastic all the way through, and it's as if he's kind of working his way towards a look of kind of he looks like a country gentleman, and or it looks as what's his face says at some stage, you look like a D.H. Lawrence minor. And none of that is going on with the collusion of an expert. He's just doing it himself, because that's what those people were like at the time. So to answer your question, did I have any of those kind of clothes? No, but I would have, as did every student in 1969. I had an army surplus greatcoat, which covered up absolutely everything, and announced you. It was your kind of badge of belonging to the kind of the hip fraternity. If you had kind of longish hair, this was the beauty about, if you wanted to look fashionable in 1969, this is what you had to do: nothing at all. Yeah, you just let your hair grow,
not shave, and
absolutely
not get your hair.
It's a very idler way of doing things. Yeah, so
absolutely,
it was like effort-free. It's like the Misty Man of the Mountain sort of thing.
Yeah, you were completely. You were on the right side of history, if that's the way you looked. The
one thing you would get on the tennis shoes that John Lennon wore on the cover of Abbey Road. Everybody had a pair of those.
Yeah,
massive sales.
Yeah.
But you couldn't buy those clothes other than it's a small number of boutiques in the King's Road. And
what about the one funny thing in Get Back is John Lennon's sideburns suddenly grow really, really quickly between the end of part 2 and he didn't have them before the rooftop concert, and then suddenly they're down here. Was that common to have these like big chops?
Haven't you?
I've watched it a couple of times. There's something else. I think I actually have one original observation. It's everyone's written about it. So I'll tell you what it is.
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, go on.
No one's mentioned this as far as I can see. It's their use of clipboards. Have you noticed that?
Oh, right. Okay.
Lennon has somebody holds up the office junior holds up the clipboard for the.
No, I tell you.
No, more than that. They've got clipboards all over the place.
Yeah.
And during the concert on the roof, he holds up. What's his name? He's called Kevin. He's the assistant roadie with the red-haired assistant.
Because Lennon can't remember the lyrics.
Can't remember the lyrics. Now, I was watching this yesterday. He gets on his knees in front of John Lennon, holds up the clipboard. Yeah. Okay, it's cold. He's on a roof.
Yeah,
they're about to start performing this song live in front of loads of cameras. But he has not put out the cigarette that's in his right hand. So he must immediately be thinking, what am I going to do? As it burns down towards my fingers, are they going to get to the end of the song? Because I'm going to have to...
They smoke while doing everything, literally everything.
They smoke all the time.
All the time.
It's smoking, and it's in fact. I love the warning at the beginning that there'll be smoking images.
There will be smoking in this.
That's right. You're told. Smoking is strong language, but it's smoking. And it's tea and toast as well. Toast is so
toast.
So
also, but another observation. It's all mother's pride. There's no sourdough. There's no
it is sliced white.
Sliced white. Yeah, they hadn't got into it was supermarket stuff.
There's no demands made at any point, they when they're asked for the food orders, it's we'll just have whatever the veg of the day is, and could they put some cheese sauce on the
cauliflower? Well, food wasn't the thing. Anyway, I remember interviewing John Cooper Clarke for the Idler, great Idler hero, and he said, in the 60s we were mods and food wasn't a thing. It wasn't like you just quickly went to the cafe.
Yeah, that's absolutely true.
Bacon and chip, bacon and eggs, and then off you went.
You didn't sit and talk about it or make any kind of big decision. It was just food was something you just dispensed with, and then got on with the rest of the day.
With your pet pills and things like that.
Yeah. Have you seen that
John Cooper Clarke book is good. Wow.
Have you seen that photograph that's doing the rounds of the internet? You must say it's been kicking around for a couple of years now, and it's a photograph of a load of sandwiches that have been prepared in a London cafe at lunchtime. Have you seen this picture? It's taken in the early 70s, and it's just got lines and lines of kind of unappetizing looking sandwiches with a slice of ham
sticking
on
all spelt wrong, aren't they?
Absolutely. And apparently this is one of the most popular posters you can get nowadays, that the kind of hipsters want to put it on their walls, that there was a time when you couldn't go in and ask for sourdough and, exactly what you wanted. That's what you got.
Complete
That's
lack of
when life
hygiene
was
as
better.
well. That's
Although
right.
I have to say, but soon after that, John Lennon did get into macrobiotic food and was hanging around in Craig Sams's cafe.
Really?
Craig Sams is still around. He was the brown rice importer, and also he sold the Beatles their Afghan coats.
Oh, really?
Oh, God.
Yeah, and he said that he told me the story that he was Lennon and Yoko came down there, and there was a live band playing that he'd booked, and this live band was playing, and this is quite exciting. Like John Lennon's watching us, so they were trying to play really well and everything. And the waiter sort of Lennon beckoned the waiter over and sort of whispered into his ear, and gave him a £10 note and said, "Can you just give this to the band to stop playing?"
Stop. How often have we all felt that?
That's wonderful.
Oh,
God.
So shall we get started?
Shall we? Yeah, let's go.
Yeah.
We're going to take you back to the childhood home, which was it Newcastle? Was that where you grew up?
No, I was only in Newcastle till I was 2, and then my parents kind of removed themselves from their humble backgrounds and put down roots in the leafy suburb of Richmond, Surrey.
Oh, right. Right. And can you remember the record playing equipment in the home and what kind of records were on it?
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I can. My parents had, quite a nice stereo. They were 70s parents. They loved Roxy music. We also had ABBA. My parents had the Beatles White Album, which I got out and laid out and just stared at the pictures in sort of wonder for hours on end. And they had their music tastes were quite hip, really, because they were quite young parents. They were the same age as younger than the Beatles, probably.
Oh, right. So go on. What year were your parents born? I have to know this.
I think 44, 45, something like that.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
Right.
And they had a nice stereo. That came into the house. That was a big purchase. I remember it, with little brown speakers, and you had to be really careful with the vinyl. Everything had to be cleaned carefully with a clean.
Oh, really?
We weren't able to touch it. It had sort of lots of knobs and green glowing stuff. I can't remember what make it was. And that was an important moment.
What were the first records that you bought? Can you remember the first singles and stuff that you owned?
Yeah, it was definitely Beatles. I bought a Beatles compilation album. The first singles were probably it was some sort of weird import thing on gold vinyl, actually. And the first singles I bought were Stranglers, Duchess, Too Much Too Young, things like that.
Right.
Your brother wrote a fantastic book called This House is Full of Yogis, about your father having a kind of conversion to a kind of meditational spiritualism.
Yeah.
As if you kind of lived in a commune for a while. Is that right?
Yeah.
Describe that.
Will slightly exaggerates, but no, what did happen was very much that one day my dad was a heavy drinking, fun loving dad. We had a pinball machine, he had a Morgan. We played Roxy music really loud. He used to come up to me and go, "Mother of Bo, I wouldn't trade you for another girl." And he was just a lot of fun. And this was our childhood. And they had drunken parties. We'd come down in the morning. There'd be overflowing ashtrays, red bottles of red wine spilt everywhere. Probably someone asleep among some broken glass under the table.
Excellent.
And that was the sort of household we had. And there was even a suggestion of swinging at one point. I mean, we later found out, not that we knew at the time, thank God. And then one day he came back and said, I was 13, my brother Will was 11. And he started talking about the 5,000-year cycle, the eternal nature of the soul that resides within us, and wearing white, like some sort of Gandhi. And then we'd come home from school and the sitting room would be full of these Indian women meditating. He'd take us meditating, we'd go out meditating with, instead of going to football, we'd sort of go meditating.
How old were you then?
I was, 13 to 16, that sort of age.
Yeah.
And I mean, I didn't mind it. My friend Simon and I went meditating with my dad, and we were listening to The Doors and smoking dope. So we thought it was quite cool in a way. It was a bit again, Beatles-ish,
With your
So-
dad?
Yeah, I thought my dad was, I didn't really mind the meditation. I found it quite interesting. My brother found it much more hard to take, and like his whole world was kind of like rocked apart, And vegetarian food, my dad started cooking these absolutely disgusting loaves of bread, like really heavy loaves of bread, and all the fun sort of went really.
Well, God. So you going back to the record? So you bought the Stranglers and a load of sort of punks. How old were you then?
I suppose 12, 13. I mean, yeah, I think I really started getting into music probably about 11 or 12, good music.
Can you remember the first group you ever saw?
Well, actually, embarrassing. The first group I ever saw was Shakin' Stevens.
No, not embarrassing at all.
And I was about 11, and I don't count that. That was like a school trip or something. And but then we saw Tubular Bells in Croydon.
Oh, right.
So that was probably, but that was with my parents. So again, that doesn't really count. I mean, one of the very first gigs I saw was probably Season in the Banshees at what was then Hammersmith Palais. And I lived near Hammersmith, so we used to go to the Hammersmith Clarendon non-stop and see bands there.
Right. Where did you go and buy records? Can you remember?
I can, our price Richmond. So what I did was save up. My mum would say, haven't you got enough records? And, and I would save up because they cost $5.99, I think. And, I was I would have been reading, I was probably reading your writing. Like I got Sounds and Melody Maker and NME.
Wow.
I would cut out cuttings from NME. I can still remember a pretentious headline for Season in the Banshees album.
Go on.
Floods of Radiance and Flame.
Wow.
God, I'm trying to think which of those that would have been in. Probably NME, I think.
It was definitely NME.
Sure.
I think it was probably by Paul Morley. It was sort of
yes, it
was. Yeah. And and then I would go down and buy the Cramps or Season of Banshees or something, and then make sure that I walk really slowly back through Richmond with the album cover facing outwards.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Under the arm.
Under the arm, so people could see what I'd bought.
Absolutely. You go the long way round home, and
Exactly.
and if you hadn't passed the girl that you were hoping to impress, you'd probably do a whole circuit and go back until you eventually found her, wouldn't you?
Exactly. And I was wearing it was Echo and the Bunnymen sort of time, so we all wore
grey coats.
Yeah.
We bought stuff in the jumble sale and charity shops, and we'd wear these sort of great coats and have sort of semi-spiky hair, earring, fags.
Oh, the joy of carrying a record under your arm in public when you were like 17 years old. I'm sorry, it's the most
you were going to
pleasure.
I know. We sent to school pretending you were going to play it somewhere, but you weren't actually. I mean, you were just carrying it around all day.
Just carrying it around. My brother,
as if you're en route to someone who had a record.
Yeah, it was great. And then if my brother had a girl coming around, he would steal my records because I had a cooler record collection than him, and then put them at the front of his record collection. So he would take my Cramps records.
Oh right, I was going to say which were the cool ones? Well, that's
the one I remember, the Cramps, and so he would take those and put them at the front of his collection. In front of his ELO records.
Yeah. Because ELO records didn't have the same cachet.
No, that's fantastic.
No, he doesn't talk about that now. His massive ELO phase. He doesn't mention that.
Well, there's nothing wrong with ELO, but ELO does not impress people at all.
We should make your brother is
really,
the music critic of the Times, actually, for anybody watching who didn't know that. So there we are. So it was ELO.
He certainly surpassed me in general coolness soon afterwards. So if it came to a cool off, he would definitely win because he looks like Mark Bolan even now. He's 53.
Yeah, he does.
It's so funny, that business though of carrying records under your arm in the hope of impressing girls. Yeah, because you are hoping to impress girls. And girls are not going to be impressed by that at all, are they, really?
They would have done it, depending what you're carrying.
He's got a Cramps record. He sounds like the kind of guy I'd like to spend time with, Pretty good.
Well, but no, Dave, if we'd been carrying Al Stewart or Teaser and the Firecat by Cat Stevens or something, that would have worked. But
I should have said my dad loved Teaser and the Firecat, and in fact, I've been playing that again recently. I mean, that is such a lovely record, isn't it? So there was some stuff that we really, really crossed over. He had very good music taste. In fact, I remember watching Old Grey Whistle Test. Wasn't that your program?
Well, we both were on it for a while. Which
and anyway, it was
were
like,
you watching it?
They had it was probably mid '80s, and they had the Ramones on.
Right.
It was the Ramones were playing Warthog Rock. And my dad was like, "They're very good, aren't they?" And he excellent. He just sort of he could tell what was good. He could spot the good. The other thing, of course, was watching Top of the Pops every week, recording it with the tape recorder. But as far as girls go, what they did like was compilation tapes. Do you remember that?
All right. Did you make romantic compilation tapes?
Well, just any compilation tape, like any stuff I liked, and you had to sort of press pause on the tape recorder of your music center, as they were called, and then play the record. Unpause it, and then play the whole record through, take it off, and then get the next record. And so on. It's a really time-consuming process.
It's very time-consuming.
For 90 minutes.
But if you made one for anybody, or particularly a girl, there was obviously a message. You had to think very carefully about the lyric of everything you put in there, didn't you?
No, I did, and I had some. I thought I was quite witty because, for example, I put the Inkspots on some of mine because I was an Inkspots fan as well. So
you like the Inkspots?
Yeah, they're very.
Which Inkspots songs?
Well, there was one girl who was, the joke was that she had big feet, so I put your feet's too big.
Yeah.
The Inkspots do your feet's too big, do they?
But
I love the Inkspots. I love the Inkspots because every single Inkspots record I've ever heard starts exactly the same way.
I love coffee. I love tea. Yes. I love the Java and it loves me. They're absolutely lovely. I don't want to start a flame in your heart.
Absolutely. I don't want to set the world on fire.
Yeah.
All that stuff. Oh, beautiful. Now, compilation tapes, the terrible thing about compilation tapes is I think you always used to, while compiling them, you always used to get too confident at one point and put a track on that was too long or something like that. And you couldn't undo your work then, you know what I mean? We give in to that tendency to be self-indulgent, don't we? When we're making tapes.
That's exactly right.
Well, you're just showing off, aren't you?
You are showing off.
Yeah, and
trying to impress the person as how erudite and interesting your musical taste is.
Well, there are some quite long songs on For Your Pleasure, I think. There's a sort of like psalm I think I might have put on, which is about 8 minutes, isn't it? So you could have put that on. But yeah,
what you should do. Always put the long track at the end.
Should be like quick 2-3 minute songs.
Yeah. Were you ever in the band?
Yeah, I was in loads of bands. My first band.
Was it called Chopper? Was it? No.
That's right. I can't believe you heard
it. I remember.
That was our high point. Yeah.
Where was that? College?
Chopper.
That was when I was at. I was an undergraduate at Jesus College, Cambridge. But I was also secretly a hardcore punk fan. So me and my friend James got me into Minor Threat, Bad Brains, and so on. There was a band called the Stupids at the time who we worshipped. They were like English hardcore punk band, and we were basically a kind of Stupids type.
The irony of this is just too wonderful. So you were an undergraduate at where again?
Well, I don't want to sound like I'm boasting. It's just a contrast between what you expect.
Sorry,
exactly that.
I was contemporary. People are. Two of us were at Oxford and 2 were at Cambridge. It was like the poshest punk band that ever existed, and our contemporaries were people like. We were like our contemporaries were people like David Cameron and whatnot, but we were playing this really aggressive, remember the first Beastie Boys single, and we were like Bad Brains was, we would have loved. We also loved Red Hot Chili Peppers, and mine, so we had these we had like Mr. Shitface, for example, was one of our songs, and they were very, 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 very short.
Were you the
like 30 seconds? I was the bassist. We almost went on John Peel. We 1 year we came second in the Cambridge Rock competition, which is pretty good.
Pretty impressive. So you actually made records. I mean, we could.
Yeah, we made records. We supported Chaos UK, who were quite a well-known punk band at the time, and also I found that literally last week. Sorry. I found out this week that we supported a band called War Dance at the Cambridge College of Technology, which is called CCAT, and there was a guy in it called Giz Butt, who later went on to play guitar for Prodigy. Now, the drummer we've just found out played in various punk bands, including War Dance, and is now a sort of well-known writer. And so there was this sort of sense that, it's a very interesting, fun, do-it-yourself scene, the punk scene in the late 80s. And it was all about making your own demo tapes. And so we actually crossed over town and gown because we were playing in all the pubs and, Peterborough Football Club or whatever. So we went beyond the colleges. And when we did play in Cambridge colleges, there'd be a bunch of Sloanes at the back going, God, this is just so embarrassing.
I'm sorry. This is so.
We were like jumping around. We had like bleached hair. We were like, the singing was like, and then we'd like jump up in the empty scissor kicks and all this sort of thing. And my tutor loved it. He was a sort of postmodernist English academic, a professor called Stephen Heath. We played him our demo tape, and he played it to all his mates because he thought it was like a sort of it was like a sort of postmodern avant-garde statement. And I think he played it to like George Steiner and some of the well-known critics of the time. And, it was called Chopper. I wish we kept it going because we were getting to be quite good. We did a cover version of Over and Over by Madonna, like a sort of punk.
Isn't it the kind of thing where you can't be quite good? You know what I mean?
Doesn't that defeat the purpose of it?
Doesn't it defeat the purpose?
Yeah, you've got to be just awful.
No,
it's got to be a racket.
You don't understand it at all.
Go on. All right, go on.
Listen to Bad Brains. I mean, the musicianship this is the sort of scene that something like Metallica evolves out of.
Right.
It's really hard to play that fast and in time and that sort of intricately. Obviously we're nothing like as good as Metallica, but it's one step beyond. It's not just sort of three chords, undertone sort of thing. It's sort of quite complex.
Lots of stops and starts, isn't it?
Lots of stops and starts. Yeah. An extreme noise terror and those sorts of bands. They sound, to the untutored ear, it might sound like a bit of a cacophony, but it's not like. I mean, the Stupids are a very technically proficient band. I mean, Tommy Stupid, the drummer, was an excellent drummer.
Tommy Stupid, so it's like the Ramones. They're all called Stupid.
Yeah, I suppose that was the idea. Yeah.
That's
so you remember the singer was called Ed Shred.
Oh right.
But we did all sorts. We were doing magazines at the time as well. My friend James and I, we played in bands, did magazines.
What, like fanzines, music magazines?
Sort of fanzine. It was called Broadsheet, and we had, I've been doing magazines since I was at school. I interviewed BowWowWow for the cover story of
brilliant.
School magazine when I was 12.
For the school
magazine. That's incredible. God,
we went to see because my mum was a showbiz correspondent on The Sun. She took me to see BowWowWow. And I think they're playing at the art college next door to the Royal Albert Hall. It's quite a cool venue.
Right.
Yeah. Royal College of Art.
Yeah, Royal College of Art. We went backstage to meet them, and the singer wasn't there. I think she had a chaperone, Annabella Lewin or Lou Win or whatever.
Well, she was only 15, I think, then, wasn't she?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and they were such tits. The band members. They sort of tried to take the piss out of my mum. And she said, well, where is Malcolm McLaren? He said, oh, he's in Rio. But Malcolm McLaren was there, and he gave me a cassette tape. And I said, why did you start the Sex Pistols? And he said, oh, well, that was a long time ago. And gave me a little C30C 6090.
Oh, right.
Cassette tape.
Of course.
So that was so then I wrote stuff in my school magazine, which was called the Sixth Form Rag.
Who else did you interview?
I interviewed my history teacher, Mr. Stoll. I asked to interview him, and he said no, he was too shy. So I interviewed Mr. Darwell Smith, the English teacher.
No more rock bands?
No, that was the only contact I had with the rock world at that point, because I was only 12, 13.
But didn't you work in a record shop at one stage?
Yeah, that was my first job. It was great. My mum at that point had a flat, which is now actually owned by Jeff Travis of Rough Trade. He bought it, but she was living in this flat in Arundel Gardens, Notting Hill. And she said, okay, you got 1 month to get out. So it was like September the 15th. And I was like, okay, I've got to go and find a job. So I just walked down to Rough Trade record shop, which is near where she lived on
Talbot Road.
Yeah. And I met Pete Pete and Nige there, and there was a job advertised as an accounts assistant, which I didn't actually get, but they gave me a job working in the skateboarding shop and doing the mail order.
Yeah.
Which was a great year. And, John Peel came in and bought my record.
Fantastic. Did he play it?
Yeah, well, it was a compilation album called Splurk. And we had 2 songs on it. I think there were about 15 other bands on it. And but we had met him before because we were doing an interview on, we'd come second in the Cambridge Rock competition, as I boasted about earlier.
Yes.
And
don't go on.
You'll have to mention it again later on.
No, he's going to go on about that again, isn't he? We came the year after that. We didn't even get placed, so we seemed to get worse in the year. But and a friend of ours did a stage dive, and but it was our last song was called Armageddon Death or something. And what our friend didn't realise was that this was a 1-chord song, so it went click, 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 boom, and that was the end of the song. And so we said, this is our last song. It's called Armageddon, Death Crisis or whatever. And so our friend Frank had been planning to do a stage dive. And in fact, I think someone had bet him to do a stage dive. So he was just about, so he got up for this last song. It's like, okay, I'm finally going to do a stage dive. Went click, 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 boom, and everyone started walking back towards the bar, and he just went flat on his face and had to go to hospital. So that's like Cambridge students trying to be cool and just sort of not quite making it, really.
I think there's a movie in this.
It really is a movie. That's fantastic.
And then we were doing an interview because there was some, I can't remember what the issue was, but we had to defend ourselves on some Cambridge, sort of crappy student radio station. We bumped into John Peel in the hallway because he had a show on Cambridge radio. And he was like, oh, I'd like to get you guys in, and we were like, really, that'd be amazing. And then his assistant called me in the holidays and they said, oh, we want he'd like you to come in the holidays and play your tape and have a chat. I was like, I just can't believe this is incredible. I'm like 20 years old or whatever. And he said, I want the Harrison and Ringo Starr of the band, not the Lennon and McCartney. And I was like, well, I play the bass, but I don't write the song, so I'll go. So me and the singer went, because we didn't really write the songs. The singer was a guy called Hugo Deadman, who looked like a sort of demented choir boy.
Why didn't you want the singer?
I don't know. No, he just said, I don't want the Lennon and McCartney. I want the George Harrison and Ringo Starr of the band. I don't know why. So we went up there, and it was really exciting. We got off the train at Cambridge, walked down the road to Cambridge radio station, and sorry, I should have unplugged the phone before.
That's all right.
And then we rang on the bell, and then he suddenly appeared. He walking down the stairs with a big pile of presumably demo tapes or whatever, jiffy bags. But it was the day after Hillsborough. And he said, look, guys, I'm really sorry I can't do this. And then started swearing, and he's so angry about what had happened at Hillsborough, justifiably, obviously, was in this absolutely terrible mood. And so it was really disappointing. And then he turned around, and this sort of moment of slight disappointment. I don't know if you ever had that when you meet a hero. I'll tell you why I was disappointed, because I guess as he turned around and went upstairs, I noticed that he had this tiny little greasy pigtail with a sort of elastic band around.
Oh God, that's heartbreaking.
And I just thought, like,
that would be crestfallen.
Would you?
Yeah.
What is it? Something about the vanity, or like, I don't know what it was.
That's a weird thing. I don't remember him ever having.
I don't either, but I think it happens to a lot of people just going through immense crisis about losing hair at the front, isn't it? You suddenly, all these people who suddenly unbutton their shirts and show huge amounts of hair.
It's the Mike Love.
They start undoing their top button.
That's it.
Absolutely.
That's it. Mike Love.
Mike Love did this.
Mike Love wore a turban, didn't he?
The Beach Boys. No, it's really. I can tell you the story of this. Mike Love, in the early days of the Beach Boys, was a little bit older than the rest of them and a little bit bald. It's starting to go from quite early. So he starts out doing a button. Yeah. Because he got a luxuriantly hairy chest. And slowly it was another button. As it went further there, another button, until he eventually used to take to the stage naked from the waist up while wearing a turban to cover his complete absence of hair there. And you were supposed to applaud this extraordinary forest of hair on his chest. That's Mike Love. That's the story of Mike Love.
Well, that wasn't the problem that we had in Chopper. We had loads of hair, and it was sort of bleached and spiking up in all sort of funny directions.
Right.
So the Peel interview never happened.
And then the Peel interview never happened. I think
it's a heartbreaker.
I know. I wrote it down in my. I had a Chopper scrapbook, and I sort of put something about it in that. But yeah, it's really heartbreaking. And nowadays, I would have been a bit more sort of pushy about it, and I would have rang the assistant back and reorganised it. But I didn't really have the confidence. So that was really the end of it. And then it was quite sad. I mean, so I had my year working in rough trade record shop, which was fantastic, absolutely brilliant. That was 1990.
What were the big sellers at the time?
Well, I remember bands like, I can't remember now. Well, I mean, it was sort of, I suppose the big thing was Sub Pop at the time. So it was like, it was just before Nirvana. So it was Green River and bands like that. It was
Mudhoney and
L7, Mudhoney, exactly, all that sort of stuff. So that was really big. And then, we loved, KLF, ambient music, chill out music was just starting to come in. And then I guess bought a lot of dub while I was there. And I've still got them all now. I've got like Lee Scratch Perry box sets and stuff like that. I just bought anything really that sort of came in. I was doing the mail order. It's obviously a brilliant way to expose yourself to weird music and good music. And it was a really, really good fun year. The other fun thing for me was meeting all these entrepreneurial young skateboarders. Gavin Hills, the great journalist who died. I met him there. He was, a real inspiration. There were the skateboard design people. They were designing skateboards, t-shirts, running small businesses. So that was a wonderful year, big inspiration.
So how did you end up with the Idler?
Well, then after my rough trade jaunt, which lasted about a year, and I thought, well, I better get on with what I really want to do, start growing up and become a journalist. And a flatmate actually was doing work experience at the Sunday Mirror magazine in Holborn Circus. And they wanted someone to come and make some phone calls like 2 or 3 days a week. So I started doing that. Turned out that the editor was an old friend of my mum's from grammar school, Catherine Hadley. And she was pretty scary, actually. And that was, again, I mean, at the time I was very snooty. I didn't like working on tabloid magazine. I wanted to work for the Independent, but looking back, it was very good magazine training, because the whole process of how a big professional magazine was put together. Alistair Campbell was lurking around. He was the Daily Mirror politics correspondent at the time, politics editor. So it was okay. I sort of basically hated it. And then I was sacked 2 years later. But while I'd been there, I had this idea for a magazine called The Idler, because
based on the Dr. Johnston's essays, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was. So
what was the philosophy behind it?
Well, the philosophy behind it was really idling is good, and there's a sort of paradox. You some people are just not suited to full-time employment like me, and it doesn't mean that you don't want to work. And again, I'll go back to the Beatles as a kind of ideal working situation where you're doing something that you really enjoy and bringing joy into other people's lives too, and somehow getting paid. And so for me, being stuck in a full-time job that I hated felt like maybe just incredibly big-headed, but it felt like a sort of waste of my time. And I wanted to do what I wanted to do, and but also I was really lazy. I was just found it very difficult to get out of bed in the morning. And occasionally I'd have a day off, and I think, okay, this is my day off where I'm going to sit down. This is obviously before internet, although I did buy a modem in around 93, 94, so we were quite early with that. But I had a fax, and I would find a commissioning editor, write out some proposals and fax them the proposals, and sometimes write them a letter with cuttings that I'd already had printed somewhere. I'd had 1 or 2 pieces in the Guardian, and so send 3 cuttings, and put these in the post, and then you didn't get a reply, and then you chase up, and it's hard work. My days off, I'm going to do this, and so I'll say, okay, I'm going to get up tomorrow at 8, have a really good morning, and I just couldn't get out of bed. I was going to get up at 10 or 11, and I had a flat in Portobello Road. I'd play Tetris all morning, just like procrastinating, and I just really struggled with this a lot, really badly. I've done it at university as well. I just found it really hard to get out of bed. in my first book, I talk about my alarm system, which was I put the Ramones on the night before on my record player on a timer plug. The timer plug was also plugged into a coffee machine. Do you remember we used to have coffee machines?
Yes. So the whole thing is ignited at the same time. Coffee plus
yeah. So what it was? So I put it on at like quite loud, like 7 or something like that. It was "It's Alive" by the Ramones, which opens with crowd noises. So the idea was that 8 o'clock I would sort of start hearing these crowd noises, like Jesus, that's going to come in really loud any second and wake everyone up. So I would leap out. Then I had to leap out of bed and turn the music down. By which time the coffee had started bubbling, and then I would stand in the middle and then have my coffee and get to the lecture on time. What actually happened was that I would leap out of bed and turn the music down and go, "Oh, this is great! I'm up. I can just go and lie in bed for a bit, and then get back into bed and fall asleep until 11. Wake up and the coffee was freezing cold, or at least very kind of stale."
It's such a brilliant idea. So it's a
Ramones
alarm clock system. You can market that.
Well, it didn't work, unfortunately. I could do it as some sort of startup.
So you decided that there's no point fighting this. You might as well start a magazine that celebrates
exactly
the lifestyle.
So I thought, why fight this? And the revelation came reading these essays by Dr. Johnson, which were written in the 1750s. A series of it was a column he had called The Idler. I think it was once or twice a week in another magazine called The Gentleman's Magazine. There were loads of these magazines, as I'm sure you know at the time. Earlier in the century, it had the Spectator and the Tatler and the Observer and the Rambler, and it was like absolutely crazy for newspapers and magazines. There was a magazine like The Week. There were all sorts of these competing things. There was the kind of Notes and Queries magazine. So people were just going nuts for printed material in the coffee houses, and he was part of that, getting paid for it. It was called Grub Street. It was the early Fleet Street, but he wrote these essays, saying just how lazy he was, and he couldn't get out of bed in the morning, and he would resolve to get up out of bed earlier next year, and then he said, next year I resolved to get up at 8 a.m. because even if I only get up at 10, that's still 2 hours earlier than I often lie in bed till, which is because I often lie abed till noon. So he'd be just literally lying in bed all morning, saying, "I've got to get out of bed. Why can't I get up?" But then, of course, he realised as well he was working during that time in his head, and then he had whatever it was, I don't know, the sort of 4 o'clock deadline. Obviously, writing by hand on a piece of paper, and the boy from the printers would look. It was so late. I'm sure you've dealt with this with contributors, or maybe you've been late yourselves, but. You know what it's like when some people get so late with their contributions to your magazine.
Oh, God. Yes.
It's exasperating.
Yeah.
They always tell you people who've never worked on a magazine before.
It's always the same.
They don't know what
it's always the same people
they're causing.
Whatever you do.
It's never anything to do with the degree of difficulty involved in the task whatsoever. It's completely a personality trait.
They also think that if they turn up late with the copy, that you'll be somehow even more pleased to see them because you're so desperate for them. For the copy. But,
and then
massively pissed
the people who make it worse are the people who turn up late and they've written twice as much as you asked for, and they expect you to be pleased.
Yeah, they think that's you doing you a favour too.
They think they're doing you a favour. Like, oh, you got twice as much as you paid for. No, now I'm going to spend another hour or two cutting all this stuff back. So it was the same with Dr. Johnson. That the boy would, the printer's shop, because everything had to be, set in lead type. So there'd be a gang of compositors. Somewhere in Fleet Street, and the boy would be sent up get fucking where's Dr. Johnson's column, run up and get it, and then he's open the door, and then Dr. Johnson would be writing it there and then, and as his pen came off the sheet one, he would give the sheet one to the boy without having looked over it or read it or anything.
Fantastic! Then
the boy would run back, and then they would start, setting the type. Then run back to get the next page. Yeah, and he did this in so he wrote at incredible speed, but it all came out. People at the time said he spoke. When he spoke. He was so articulate. Yeah, it was like listening to a second edition. This idea of momentum, the idler's actually working. You need that indolence in a way, or empty space to be creative.
I used to work in Holborn, and nearby Johnson used to go to this coffee shop, I think, and when he was there, rumor would get out that he was there, and when he was there, he would hold forth and speak, wouldn't he? And people would come from miles around just to kind of listen at the windows and look through the crack in the door to be able to hear this guy performing.
Well, it's like the Beatles
So
again.
exciting.
Like the girls at Apple, they were like peeping through the window, weren't they, to watch them play? I mean, I think there are these people that, Dr. Johnson is just a massive inspiration. Dickens is another one, and the Beatles, and the Beatles, Dickens, probably even more than Dr. Johnson. You can't really see how they did it. It's like magic. So anyway, that was. So I want to live a creative life. Really, I don't want to sort of have a 9 to 5. I want to do my own thing. So my friend Gav had an Apple Mac, and I went around with the idea for this magazine, The Idler. It's going to have Dr. Johnson on. Not a very commercial start, but it's going to have Dr. Johnson.
Yes, what a sell.
Yeah, an old dead white guy from no one's with a wig, and that's our cover star, And we had really tiny cover lines on the front. You couldn't read them, And but I was on the dole. Yeah, I got sacked from the Sunday Mirror magazine, and I was like, okay, well, I'm on the dole. I might as well get on with this thing. And they sent me on one of these sort of business courses for dolies, like as if they're going to find the next Richard Branson. There's all these people who've been on some sort of scheme. We're all sitting there, these sort of ne'er-do-wells, and these people come in trying to teach you how to start a business. Well, actually, there were some really good people there. And one guy said, "Look, just do it. Just get on with it. Just print 50 copies. Don't think about it." And we sort of followed the advice. We raised money from friends. We cobbled together about 800 quid. And that was enough to print, and also I had some really talented friends. I mean, Louis Theroux in the first issue, and this was in '93. So, and his brother Marcel's a good friend. I suddenly realised that you look around you, I've got illustrators, photographers, and some really brilliant people in our early mid 20s who just wanted to get published. So that was another thing. Gavin Hills, I thought we could gather together some really, talented people and do something which is a bit beyond the fanzine. And we printed 1,000 copies. You had to, again, you'll remember you had to get these sort of films made at a typographic house, and then take the films from the typographic house to the printer. And
I remember it so vividly.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Letraset headlines.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's so much easier now. And
subbing, Tipex.
Yeah.
It all stuck to the soles of your feet.
It did. Spray mount
magazines.
David, I talk about spray mount. Do you remember there was a time when you could legally spray a kind of an aerosol glue to make things
fixative,
to get high
and
on
then
it.
breathe it in.
Yes.
I can't believe we're still alive.
Well, I guess and I'm sure it's the same for you too. But I just think magazines are, maybe it's we're still going, but I mean with a print magazine. But I think it's such a lovely art form because it's never finished. It's not actually a perfectionist art form. You do one, it's like, okay, we can improve on it next time.
Yeah,
we can tweak that and do something really good. And what I'm trying to do with, obviously not successfully, but I used to love that excitement, that real thrill of opening a new NME when it arrived, what's going to be in it. And, it was just a lovely, that's the feeling I'm trying to recreate with magazines now. It's like, it comes in the post or you buy it in the shop. It's like really excited to get that and see what they put together for you. And, you trust the editor's curatorial abilities.
Yeah.
And we sometimes do, I'm sure again you've been through this, you sometimes do a sort of reader survey, what would you like to see more of, or whatever. And they don't really know, do they? It's like it's like writing, it's like saying the Beatles saying, we're just about to produce our third album.
What sort of song would you like to hear more of?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Ballads, tick. That's right.
Yeah. Which songs did you like best on with the Beatles, and which did you like least, and what would you like on the next album? They would have stayed still, didn't they?
10 years' time.
Yeah. More or less of the following: George Harrison, John Lennon.
I don't think the Beatles did a focus group.
That's true.
Had they done a
Yeah.
focus group, they would have never have
How-
recorded "You Know My Name, Look Up the Number."
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Which I really like.
So do I. I love it too.
I used to like.
Welcome to Slaggers. Yeah.
Big old daddy old bells.
That's it.
Yeah, it's really, really, no, is it like, who is singing in it? It's like a sort of jazz. It's
Well,
like a
Paul
sort of club
McCartney
singer.
sings most of it. Interesting
Right.
pop fact about "You Know My Name, Look Up the Number."
Know my
For
name,
2 years,
yeah.
they used to go back and just do little bits of it when they had time. And I'm fairly sure they were recording it the day of the photo shoot for the Abbey Road cover. Is that right, Dave?
They something
Didn't they do a
very
bit that
much
morning?
like that. That was it was like the next thing they did, because I wrote about this, that they did, at the same time they put out Abbey Road, which is kind of the most polished record, probably, the most commercially attuned record they ever did. Same day, they're noodling around with my name, look up the number.
Where was it released then? I thought it was released. Is it not on Abbey Road?
B-side of
It's a B-side of
one of the last singles, and I can't remember which
Okay,
one.
I think I got that Beatles Rarities album, which came out years and years ago, the blue one, which has it's just called Beatles Rarities, and it's got "She Loves You" in German and things like that, and it's got Across the Universe, the sort of the nicer, simpler version.
Yeah,
I think "You Know My Name, Look Up the Number" must be on that then.
It was the B-side of something.
it's a B-side.
Was it Let It
of the
Be?
last singles. I
B-side
think
of
it's
Let It Be, and No Old Brown Shoe was the B-side of Let It Be. Is that
Yeah.
right? We got the right album.
I used to actually try and work
Winding
out the telephone number on that. I used to sit there listening to it and wonder if I could work out the telephone number. Maybe it was one of their telephone numbers. The one, the two, what the
That's right.
you?
The number one. That's right. The number two. That's right.
I was like,
It's
one,
kind of-
two. No, hang on. They're not going to give me a telephone number. I just realised.
But I think it's also a kind of homage to Vivian Stanchel, that "You Know My Name, Baby." That kind of ridiculous cabaret.
Well,
scene.
that's the other thing. I mean, I've had a Neil Innes binge this week. It's the Ruttles are just so good.
Phenomenal, the Ruttles.
Unbelievable. If you watch their rooftop concert, have you watched that recently?
No.
It's absolutely hilarious. It's so good. The song, it's called "Get Up and Go, Get Up and Go, Get Up and Go Back Home."
That's right.
Do. And they recreated it really wittily. It's brilliant.
You listen to those Ruttles songs, you can hear maybe 3 or 4 distinct Beatles songs in the mix. Just the chord changes and a little lyric.
He was a genius.
Neil Innes.
Incredibly clever guy.
I think Neil Innes was actually more than Bibb Stank. I mean, Bibb Stanchel had the sort of, I don't know, surrealist sort of showmanship.
Yeah,
Neil
absolutely.
Innes is very humble, but he's incredibly talented.
We had him as a guest on Word in Your Ear.
Really?
Just before he died.
Oh.
And of all the people we had, he was the least bitter man. You get anybody who's been kicking around in the music business one way or another for a long period of time, they tend to have some kind of residual bitterness.
Yeah,
somebody who screwed them over. Neil Innes did not have that at all. Have you enjoyed all this? He says it's all been wonderful. Absolutely everything.
But then again, that might have been assisted by the fact that he had a successful court case against Noel Gallagher, hadn't he?
Yeah, for whatever, because it was How Sweet to Be an Idiot.
How Sweet to Be an Idiot. It's exactly the same chord sequence, exactly the same melody. So he won.
I'm free to be whatever and then his one is like, how sweet to be an idiot.
Oh, with their genius songs.
Oh, he was just
Cheese and Onions, I think, is what his high points.
CHEES. And then they do it's not only that, but they do Ron Nasty, the John Lennon character, gets married to a sort of strange young woman, and he meets her in the pretentious gallery.
Yes.
So he goes into this gallery called the Pretentious Gallery in Savile Row, whatever, and there's this woman dressed up in a Nazi uniform doing some ridiculous bit of installment performance art.
Yeah.
And then they're all being interviewed by the world's press. They're sitting in a bath with a shower pouring on their heads, like the water just pouring down as some kind of statement. And Neil Innes does this brilliant Lennon impersonation. I mean, it's just like sort of perfect, it's his intonation and everything. Really funny.
Oh yeah,
Fantastic.
great man. So listen, what we normally do is we ask people to tell us. We finish these chats by getting people to tell us what is the greatest record ever made. Is this something you give some thought to?
What can you have a whole album, or is it?
You
Could be
can
an
choose
album, could be a
whatever you
single,
like. It can be
whatever. Just the greatest record ever
anything.
made.
So difficult, isn't it?
Yes.
I sometimes think that Never Mind The Bollocks by the Sex Pistols is the greatest album ever. I mean, it was.
Is it well, in terms of when did you last listen to it?
Well, it's.
I'm not sure I'm having that. It might be the most influential. I don't know.
It's part of the lyrics are very, very interesting. They're very philosophically close to the ancient Greek cynic philosophers. And they're even a little bit Epicurean and with a hint of stoicism.
I have never heard anybody.
There you
talk about
go.
this record. That's in such a way.
That's all we got time for.
And we'll have to leave it there on that bombshell.
Well, okay, no,
Good luck with the
That
tour.
is fantastic. So you're talking about the Greek philosophical
That's very good
concept.
stuff. Good.
Diogenes lived in a barrel, famously. So
Yeah.
he spat at the rich people.
Yeah.
He pissed in public. He urinated in public. He
Yeah.
threw away all his possessions. He says, "I don't need anything." Now, Johnny Rotten says, I don't want a big house in the country. I'm very happy where I am. Thank you very much. Now, that's a good philosophical statement, worthy of the ancient Greek. I mean, these things come back a lot in pop. Imagine no possessions in Imagine. That's a kind of statement of the Greek cynic philosophy. And he's saying, why is everyone rushing around? It's in the Beatles, it's in punk. Why is the punks are obviously very kind of anti-work, anti-full-time work, anti-jobs, So I think that's one of the greatest records ever made.
Word in Your Attic, a Zoom with a View.